Dear Madam President, dear Chancellor, ladies and gentlemen, with this draft budget for 2026, you have created a monument for yourself. You will go down in history as the biggest bankrupt of all chancellors of the Federal Republic of Germany. He's not here now, though. The Federal Audit Office has just given you in writing. If a third of spending is on credit, then the state finances are on the brink. Since the Chancellor isn't here right now, Mr. Spahn, that's extreme politics. Extreme politics means plucking the people of this country like a Christmas goose, pursuing a policy of open borders, and selling the people of this country as if they were willing to do so. This is extreme politics, what you stand for. I hope the Chancellor returns soon. Extreme politics means taking on almost 1 trillion euros in new debt in just 4 years. That's 50% of all the debt accumulated over the past 75 years. On top of that, in just 4 years. This isn't just a betrayal of the citizens, to whom you promise something completely different. This is a direct march to national bankruptcy. You secured $500 billion in special debt under the pretext that the money was needed for investments. This, too, constitutes fraud. This has to be said. You don't want to build a single kilometer of new highway. You can't even maintain the existing road network for that money. The whole thing is lies and fraud, and the taxpayer is being ripped off. More money in the system without value being created in return inevitably means a rise in inflation, and that destroys the prosperity of the middle class. Interest rates are rising, taking up an ever-increasing share of government spending. Anyone who can only service the interest on their debts with new debt is bankrupt. France has already reached the stage of delaying insolvency. Germany, under this federal government, is following closely behind. The wave of bankruptcies continues unabated across the country. Last year's peak of almost 22,000 corporate bankruptcies will even be surpassed by 2025. These are dramatic figures. Further dramatic figures, major insolvencies of companies with annual revenues of EUR 10 million or more are expected to rise by a full 25% this year compared to the previous year, as in previous years. Almost 185,000 employees lost their jobs last year due to corporate insolvencies. Over 92,000 more were added in the first half of this year alone, and the autumn wave of insolvencies is yet to come. Not a week goes by without dramatic news of job cuts and layoffs. Volkswagen, 35,000, Mercedes-Benz, 40,000, ZF, 14,000, ThyssenKrupp, 11,000, around 40% of the workforce. The steel and chemical industries are currently saying goodbye to Germany. Deindustrialization and migration affect all industrial sectors, most notably the decline of the automotive industry. Hundreds of thousands of productive jobs have already been lost, and hundreds of thousands more will follow. The major manufacturers are going out of business. The German middle class, the guarantor of prosperity and good jobs across the country, is collapsing, and fates depend on these figures. Desperate families, shattered dreams, houses that can no longer be paid off, living standards that can no longer be maintained, excessively high taxes and energy prices, dilapidated infrastructure, excessive regulation, absurd rules, and stifling bureaucracy are the all too familiar reasons. and they are doing nothing. The main cause behind this is the ideological, irrational dogma of climate protection, which the rest of the world is currently abandoning. Your reckless journey, the energy transition, is estimated to cost an additional 4 to 5 trillion euros over the next 2 decades. I'll repeat that again, using different figures. That's a cost of 4,000 to 5,000 billion euros, with no discernible benefit, but with massive economic damage. Please read the economic reports from major economic institutes. You are ruining this country, and you are continuing precisely this reprehensible climate policy. You even sneaked this climate target into the Constitution, together with the Greens, with a defeated Bundestag, in order to meet this climate target. The Commission report presented by Economics Minister Reike states it in black and white. The so-called climate targets will only be achieved because the German economy will continue to shrink. Meaning less production will occur because companies will either go bankrupt or move abroad. This is a disgrace. You want to destroy the German economy in order to achieve your climate goals. You want to dismantle Germany, because if you cared about the German economy, you would have to go back on your broken election promise and reverse the nuclear phase-out, bringing down energy prices in this country. But they prefer to stand idly by and watch the ideologically motivated destruction of the decommissioned power plants. On October 25th, the machine breaking at the Gundremmingen nuclear power plant is scheduled to continue. The 2 160-meter-high cooling towers are being demolished. In Markus Söder's Bavarian region, the destruction of nuclear power plants apparently can't go fast enough. While green fanatics leave a trail of scorched earth in their wake, they are planning, without any real basis, 80 new gas-fired power plants that will be powered by overpriced American liquefied natural gas, while private households are to be ripped out of oil and gas heating systems and replaced with inefficient heat pumps. That's your policy. You promised something else during the election campaign. The whole world has had enough of climate policy, even the New York Times recently stated. Only in CDU-ruled Brussels and Berlin do people still firmly believe in this. Without a functioning economy, the welfare state cannot be financed in the long term. They ignore the impending collapse. Instead of tackling urgently needed reforms to the social security system, you are further increasing social security contributions. In doing so, you are further exacerbating the injustice of a system that unilaterally burdens the working population with the burden of an irresponsible migration policy. Statutory health insurance funds are missing billions in contributions because you stubbornly refuse to fully compensate the healthcare costs of citizens' income recipients. The citizen's allowance itself has become a migrant allowance and an unconditional basic income whose costs have spiraled out of control. But it's not just that. Worse still, it's become a self-service store where rip-off artists can enrich themselves unashamedly. The billion-dollar fraud involving fake residential addresses and forged documents is out in the open. Your federal government is doing nothing about it. The citizens' income system is broken. It needs to be restructured from the ground up. Mr. Merz, the German Chancellor, promised this during his election campaign. Absolutely nothing is happening. Why? Because Ms. Boss has no intention of reducing the number of recipients. She actually wants to pump even more money into a system and recruits additional people into our social security systems in Arabic, all at the expense of the hardworking German population. Please explain to the working population what's supposed to be socially just about this, dear SPD. A welfare state and open borders are mutually exclusive. Explain that to me. That's also the reason why you, as a 13% party, have collapsed and are no longer the party of employees and workers. That's who we are. That's why you want to ban us with your farce. I'll come back to that in a moment. You're making politics against your own people, and we're making politics for your own people. That's what fundamentally distinguishes us from you. I know the term people offends you. Above the Bundestag stands the German people. Make a mental note of who you're actually making politics for. The German people, the honest, tax-paying citizens of this country. You have to make policy for them. The refugees will pay their pensions later was one of the lies intended to whitewash CDU Chancellor Merkel's "We Can Do It" coup. 10 years later, pensioners are expected to pay special contributions, work longer hours, and possibly even complete a year of compulsory military service to cover the costs of mass migration. The contempt for the generation that built this country couldn't be more clearly expressed than you have here. The misuse of the education system as a repair shop for misguided migration policies has taken its toll in a dramatic decline in performance comparisons since 2015. Schools with over 90% migrant populations, classes where the majority of students no longer speak German, are no longer uncommon. Yes, because you send your children to private schools and simply leave the local population to do their own work. If you send your children to school, you'll also know what's going on in this country. Providing education under these circumstances is becoming a challenge. They are responsible for raising a lost generation. But the influx continues, exacerbating the situation. Because your boastfully proclaimed migration turnaround is a cheap bluff. And we just heard that in the Chancellor's speech. Back to the numbers. In the first 4 months, just 700 people were turned back. I repeat, in the first 4 months, just 700 people were turned back. At the same time, 32,000 new asylum seekers arrived. The number of follow-up applications has skyrocketed. That's the truth. The number of follow-up applications has skyrocketed. And with regard to returns, further figures, with regard to returns under the Dublin procedure, nothing has improved since the change of government. Quite the opposite. They have even worsened compared to the traffic light government. The Federal Minister of the Interior remains silent on the recently uncovered scandal of mass fraud in naturalization procedures involving forged language certificates and integration tests. Perhaps he will say something about it at some point. This raises the urgent question, and it hasn't been asked yet. of how many naturalizations have been fraudulently obtained in recent years using false information and documents and should actually be revoked. When practically every naturalization application in Germany's major cities is simply waved through, there can obviously be little talk of serious examination and application of the law. With the rampant brutalization of our cities and the omnipresent violence on the streets, you are leaving the citizens to deal with it alone. No cosmetic language, no whitewashing as a way to clarify the situation will help. Ultimately, only a restrictive migration policy can counteract this decline. The spiteful and vicious reactions to the murder of Christian conservative Charlie Kirk in the U.S. reveal an alarming acceptance of political violence. That's the way things are viewed here. They've proven it. President Trump has drawn the necessary conclusions and declared the left-wing extremist Antifa a terrorist organization. The Netherlands and Hungary are following suit. Why not Germany too? Quite simply, we just heard it, because here in Germany, organized left-wing extremism and its thugs have sympathizers everywhere in this building. Vice Chancellor Klingbeil openly declares his allegiance to Antifa. These are the German conditions in this government. No less scandalous is the instrumentalization of an institution like the Federal Constitutional Court as a partisan political weapon by filling judicial positions with political activists. SPD candidate Anne-Catherine Kaufholt, a lawyer who advocates for opposition bans, expropriations, and nationalizations, prioritizes climate protection over parliamentarism. And advocates for a supergovernment of unelected experts to oversee global systemic oversight, is set to be appointed to Karlsruhe this week. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a scandal to appoint someone like that to the Federal Constitutional Court. You are completing the destructive work of Angela Merkel and the Traffic Light Coalition. Mr. Merz, your word cannot be trusted. Because no one knows where your coalition partner will take you next. Time is running out. It's still possible to turn things around with an immediate program like this. Stop the energy transition and return to nuclear power. I will read this to you again and again in every speech here. End subsidies for wind and solar power immediately. Abolish the CO2 tax immediately. Activating basic social security instead of the failed citizens' income. Finally, abolish this citizens' income. Income tax with uniform, low rates, and high allowances. Ban on public funding of political pseudo-non-governmental organizations. Reform of residence and citizenship laws. Naturalization only after at least 10 years of citizenship. Comprehensive border controls, the rejection of all illegal immigrants, and rigorous deportations, especially of criminals. The better alternative, ladies and gentlemen, is on the table. An AfD government will implement it. And if you want to contribute to this, it's up to you, dear colleagues from the Union, to free yourselves from the firewall. Our country can't wait much longer until you finally come to your senses.